For those of you who missed it, they did announce Dimension Force as the next core booster following Battle of Chaos, so that should hit us in the TCG sometime around April, and I believe it would be releasing in Japan in January or February. I don't know the exact date, but people were really excited last night because the majority of what was revealed, 6 cards I think in total, was all support for Pendulum, specifically Oddis and Performapal, and there's definitely some really good cards there. So as a result, as one might expect, the market has definitely seen some action on that front, especially with a lot of the Oddis and Pendulum cards that have been relevant in the past. Plus, Burst of Destiny is only a week old, so we've got some Swordsoul stuff to take a look at, as well as just some other generally higher price things in this week's Ion Market. Alright guys, welcome into Ion Market, and like I said, with the Dimension Force set coming out, people have been very excited to kind of go after certain Pendulum cards, especially some in higher rarity. So we're going to start off by taking a look at that, and I'm just going to start things off with Oddis Pendulum Dragon from Duelist Alliance. Now this card, if you may remember back in the day, was very expensive when it was actually meta relevant. As more Pendulums came out, this card saw less play, but it's always been a fan favorite, and it's a legacy card, so it's going to have value no matter what, at least for the first edition copies. If we actually take a look at the near mint copies of this card on sale, for the unlims, they're around $5, give or take, and the first eds get pretty high, around 8 before going up. One of the things that I do want to point out, though, as it pertains to this card in general is, I mean, there's good reason to think that it might end up being something that sees play, just given the fact that the direct Oddis support is there, and this is still a pretty good card that's the centerpiece for a lot of the Oddis fusions and ritual monsters and so forth. It does have an ultimate rare printing, and the ultimate rare printing is obviously going to be the more expensive variant, with the unlims near mint around 15, and I'm fairly certain the first eds are a lot higher, around, wow, you have to go to the second page, around 25 cheapest for near mint first eds on the ultimate rare. So that is to say, basically, the Oddis Pendulum Dragon himself is going pretty heavily for its higher rarity versions, but be aware that there are different versions depending on your preference, and there are 8 total printings of this card, including an alternate art, and I don't even think they're showing the... No, they are. Okay, so there is the prismatic, or, well, what do you want to call it? This alternate secret rare, I guess, from the Megatins back in the day, which I am not a fan of, but some people might like it. I think it was called Platinum Secret Rare. It does have a common printing as well as a super from Pendulum Evolution, so it's very accessible, but the higher rarity prints are relatively low in quantities, and if you want them and you're interested in going after them, I would maybe suggest getting in on that sooner rather than later, simply because people are chasing it, but we don't even know whether or not Oddis himself is going to be game-breaking or played. I'm just telling you that there have absolutely been sales on it, and that might be something to keep an eye on. One of the first things that came to my mind with the Pendulum support in general is Pendulum Call. We've seen this card see play over time in Magicians. It used to be limited. It's a really good card, and I don't know how well the Magicians specifically are going to tie into this newest wave of support, but Pendulum Call is a card to keep an eye on. It's around $8-ish for the super rare, and the common, which is from the Master of Pendulum Structure deck, seems to be closer to 4 or 5, but neither one is super high in listing, so just something to keep in mind. This is a card that a lot of people have already, maybe from previous decks, previous formats, and you've just held on to, but it is limited in terms of its printings. There's only the super rare and the common, and it'd be a really good candidate to get a reprint in something, maybe Ghost from the Past or whatever, just to be more accessible and get that foil bump. But it's just one of those cards that is really good, and one that if you are interested in Pendulums, you probably do want to keep an eye on. The other Oddis card that has some alternate rarities is Oddis Vortex Dragon. Now this is a really good card. It's still powerful. It can negate cards basically by shuffling a Pendulum into the extra deck, and it also can bounce an opponent's card monster to the hand if it's special summoned, so it combos really well with the new Pendulum Ritual Monster, which basically, when it leaves the field for certain qualifications, allows you to special summon an Oddis monster from your extra deck, and that includes Vortex. Vortex, as you can see for the ulti, is around 27 listings left, with the cheapest first editions being 25 and going up from there, and it's from Dimension of Chaos, so, you know, just something to think about there in terms of it not being the most accessible, despite that rewave that did come out. However, it does have a few other printings. The Legendary Dragon Dex has a common version. It was a super in Pendulum Evolution, but you will see the sales rates on these are pretty high, and people have been going after them. So, regardless of what your preference is, I would say get a copy of this card if you have any interest in it, sooner rather than later. Megatin Secret Rares look nice and are pretty cheap in comparison, so you should be able to get this without overextending too much. unless you're looking for the ulti. Now, Oddis Arc Pendulum Dragon is a card that I forgot existed and has been selling quite a bit, around $7 to $8. If an Oddis card you control is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can special summon an Oddis monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard, and that triggers with this in the Pendulum Zone. This is a really good card. It was only in the Legendary Dragon decks and has not been reprinted anywhere else, so you can obviously imagine that the quantities are low, with around 20, and the free tutorage from the deck with cards like Sky Iris is definitely really good. Something to keep an eye on. I'm sure as these cards are out a little bit longer and people have a chance to playtest, we'll see what kind of decks they're being used in and how they're kind of fitting into everything, but right now, just wanted to point out that it is a card that is very low quantity and very limited printings, but is actually pretty good overall. Oddis Revolution Dragon from Rise of the Duelist is pricey and has definitely been selling, but not like crazy. You can see there's still only been a couple of sales today and a few last night. So you can certainly get this. It's a really good card, and it's definitely a card that would see play, as long as, you know, any Dragon Pendulum decks are relevant due to its searchability. So, card to keep an eye on, but don't forget, of course, it does have a reprint in the Megatins. Megatin ones are selling, actually, pretty well today. There's been a very high sales rate on them, I think because they're cheaper and you can pick them up in sets. But I would get this. They're about $1 a piece. If you're interested in the deck at all, I would definitely make sure to have that now versus chasing it down later. And like I mentioned, Oddis Arc Pendulum Dragon already is one you're going to want to keep consideration for too. Oddis Pendulum Dragon Ultimate Rare I mentioned previously, but I had a tab open for it. Again, relatively low in quantities with 30. It's Duelist Alliance. It's a cool card. It does look really nice, but it does have that collector's value going for it as well, so something to consider. Performapal Oddis Dissolver is a card from Battle of Legends Light's Revenge that has been selling a little over the past couple of days, and interestingly enough, I mean, it's a decent card in the sense that you can fusion summon using this card and cards in your Pendulum Zone, so it's a bit of a unique effect, and while it is in the Pendulum Zone, you can also fusion summon a dragon monster. Not a terrible card that might have some synergy with some of the other Oddis cards, and is just a card people are looking at because it is a Performapal that only has one print, and it is from a set that is about 4 years old at this point. I don't know that I would necessarily go crazy on this, but, I mean, $1.50, $2, if you can get them around that rate and it's something you think could be good, maybe keep an eye on it. Oddis Synchron we've seen go up before, and this one's about $3 with, I think, some real potential due to the fact that it can kind of give you some extra field extension when it's normal summoned. You can revive a Performapal or Oddis monster, and it allows you to special summon a card from your Pendulum Zone, synchro summon with it immediately. So it's cute, it has some neat interactions, and of course being a Synchron, being a tuner, dark, level 2, means it has a lot to offer. So just another card that people have chased down in the past, relatively low listings, but still pretty decent in terms of stock if you want to get one. And of course, Oddis Rebellion Dragon Ultimate Rare. Really cool card back from Clash of Rebellion. This is super cheap, you know, comparatively to its, you know, collector's value being a really nice looking ulti. It's actually not the worst card ever, but it's pretty much one of those cards that's not really worth the risk or effort to get it out in terms of what you have to invest. I think people will go after this for its collector's value, but it may be something that could see some play. I'm honestly not 100% familiar with the exact effect. If you Pendulum Summon, you can special summon it. If it's Xyz summoned using an Xyz monster, destroy as many level 7 or lower monsters your opponent control. Yeah, the problem is it's really level specific. People do play Lynx, people do play Xyz. This card is, you know, sort of been outclassed by just the aging of the game, but I do think it's a neat card to keep an eye on if you're sort of looking at what might go up and sort of playing that market game. A few other things to note. The Fluanderies have been doing okay. Prices have kind of settled a bit, with M-Pen going down to 19. It was a size like 25 last week and has sort of settled. I think this will trickle down a little bit more unless the deck tops something relevant. So you could probably wait if you weren't super interested in grabbing them. But again, it is one of the cards that is a candidate to go up if the deck does do something. I think the biggest candidate to go up, though, would be the Magnificent Map, which is pretty stocked because people have obviously been opening their boxes and listing them, but it's around $7 and the price trend has gone up and people are buying them, you know, pretty consistently. A lot of sales. Someone bought 10 earlier today for 7 a piece. I just think it's a really good card that enables the deck, and it's definitely a card you'd want to have. So if you look at Flunder, and you think about the fact that in the Battle of Chaos set, they get a couple of really good support pieces, now might be a good time to grab this simply so that you have it, and you don't have to kind of chase it down later. And just a quick note on the supers, Rabina and Eaglin are both supers that are around $1, and are pretty high in quantities, but are actually selling at a really good rate, and I don't know whether or not there's a lot of a high ceiling for them beyond that $1 mark, but $1 or $2 for supers that you may pull a decent amount of, certainly not the worst thing, so I just wanted to point those out. And lastly for this video, Swordsoul's have been seeing a lot of hype, obviously. It'll be interesting with the regional and YCS events coming up, whether or not these cards really kind of take that next step, but Emergence is definitely up from a low of about $7 to $8 last week. It's around 11 to 12 now, and that, you know, being a rota for the deck, we've typically seen cards that fall into that category go up over time. It just happens as the decks do better. This is one of the types of cards people chase after. And that's just pretty much the way it goes. YuGiOh was as high as 70 at one point. It's fallen back out to around 60, which is great. Hopefully it falls a little bit lower so it's more accessible, because right now Swordsoul is a very expensive deck, and I think it's a deck people will like to go after. And just Swordsoul Strategist as well as Swordsoul Supreme Sovereign, both ultras that are decent and definitely used in the deck, and both very cheap, around $1, $1.50. So might be a card that you could look at, you know, as Swordsoul gets more cards in the upcoming set, and as the deck just really hasn't even had a chance to do too much yet. Eyes could end up on this at some point, and these could go up. If you're interested in maybe picking up the deck little by little, these are cheap right now, and you can easily grab them and just wait until YuGiOh, you know, hits a price that you're comfortable with. And finally, Gravity Collapse, a card that I didn't really realize went up, and I'm a little bit late to the party on this, but people have been chasing it down. It's a counter trap. If your opponent would summon a monster or monsters, you send a synchro you control to the grave to negate that summon, and if you do, destroy the monster, and then you lock your opponent out of summoning for the rest of the turn. It is really good. It's similar to that Mayakashi trap that Mayakashi got, except this isn't archetype specific. It just works pretty much for any synchro. So it's definitely a solid side option for Swordsoul as a way to counter a lot of decks in the game. And having only 2 prints, one from Starstrike Blast and one from an OTS pack, means it's probably going to be a little tricky to get, but there's 6 copies of it available from Starstrike and around 36, so a little bit more accessible from the OTS. So there's been a lot of movement, and I think we'll see a lot more movement later in the week as people start to go after quantities of Pendulum stuff. It's obviously impossible to keep up with everything, and I'm sure some of the 10E stuff has moved as well. But I figured I'd at least put out there some of it, talk about some of those cards and what might be worth looking at, as well as just what some of the best sellers have been. So hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, please comment down below. Let me know what you think about this week's prices, and whether or not you think you know, another market watch might be in order, simply because I don't know how much I've covered, and there's obviously going to be a lot more movement. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.